My wife coldly declared, "Not tonight or any night," ending our intimacy forever. So I redirected my time, attention, and resources elsewhere. When she lost her job and begged for help, I handed her divorce papers. I still remember the exact moment those words left Jessica's lips with such casual finality. We'd been married 6 years, and I thought we had built something solid together. I'm a senior marketing manager at a tech consulting firm, pulling in $95,000 annually, while Jessica worked as an HR consultant, making around $65,000. We owned a nice 3-bedroom house in suburbia, took decent vacations, maintained what I thought was a normal, comfortable life. That evening started like any other. I came home after a long day hoping to connect with my wife, maybe share dinner and relax together. Instead, I found her scrolling through her phone with unusual intensity, completely absorbed in what I later realized were radical feminist Instagram accounts that had been consuming more of her attention lately. When I leaned over to kiss her neck, something that used to make her smile, she jerked away like I'd attacked her. "Don't, I'm not in the mood." "You haven't been in the mood for weeks," I said, trying not to sound frustrated. "Is everything okay?" That's when she put down her phone, looked me straight in the eyes with an expression I'd never seen before, and delivered those devastating words. "Not tonight or any night. I'm done with that part of our relationship." The finality in her voice made my blood run cold. She continued with this eerily calm tone, like she was explaining something to a child. "I'm comfortable with our life together, the house, our social circle, the stability. But I'm no longer interested in physical intimacy with you or any man. I've been reading about how women are conditioned to provide physical affection to men, and I've decided I'm not participating in that patriarchal expectation anymore." My mind raced through possible responses, but I just sat there stunned. How do you reply to someone unilaterally ending physical intimacy in a marriage without discussion? "So, you're just deciding this affects both of us without any conversation?" I finally managed. "I don't need your permission to set boundaries with my own body," she replied, her tone getting that edge I'd come to recognize when she quoted her online groups. "The fact that you think this requires discussion just shows how entitled men are to women's bodies." I tried bringing up counseling 3 days later. "We don't need therapy," she responded dismissively. "There's nothing wrong with me, and I'm not going to be pressured into physical intimacy just because society expects it. Maybe you should get therapy for your dependency on female validation." Everything I said was twisted to make me sound like an oppressor. I was living with a stranger wearing my wife's face, someone who viewed our entire relationship through an ideological lens that painted me as the villain for expecting basic human connection. 2 weeks after her declaration, sitting in my car outside our house, I realized I had a choice. I could continue living in this emotional desert, or I could redirect my time, attention, and resources towards something that offered actual growth potential. As a senior marketing manager, I'd built my career on strategic thinking and resource allocation. My professional success came from analyzing situations objectively, identifying leverage points, and executing systematic plans. If Jessica had unilaterally changed our relationship terms, I could make strategic adjustments of my own. My redirection began immediately. I set my alarm for, giving myself a full hour before Jessica woke up. Those quiet morning hours became sacred time, free from her judgmental stare and passive-aggressive comments. I started with 20 minutes of meditation, then physical exercise, push-ups, sit-ups, and runs around the neighborhood. "You're up early," she commented on the 3rd day, finding me reading at the kitchen table with my coffee. The slight annoyance in her voice was obvious. She was used to dominating the morning space while I stumbled around half asleep. "Just making some changes," I replied casually, not offering further explanation. She muttered something under her breath about toxic masculinity and exercise culture that I pretended not to hear. The 2nd week, I joined a gym near my office. Instead of rushing home to an increasingly uncomfortable environment, I spent an hour working out after work. The physical exertion became therapy, each rep pushing out fragments of resentment and self-pity, while I fantasized about a future where Jessica wasn't the center of my universe. I also reconnected with old friends Jessica had always disliked for being too masculine. Nothing dramatic, just casual lunches and after-work drinks. These weren't therapy sessions or wife-bashing meetings. They were about rebuilding connections that had nothing to do with my identity as husband to an increasingly hostile woman. What struck me was how many other guys were experiencing similar patterns. My buddy Chris was dealing with a girlfriend who'd suddenly decided his video gaming hobby was problematic, despite dating him 3 years, knowing it was his main stress relief. My college friend Mark couldn't post anything on social media without his wife publicly commenting to correct his thinking on various issues. "It's like they want us to be both mind readers and punching bags," Chris said during one lunch. "You can't win." That phrase resonated. You can't win if you keep playing by constantly changing rules you had no say in creating. Maybe the answer was to stop playing their game and create my own. I started setting aside money in a separate account Jessica couldn't access. Nothing dramatic that would affect our household contributions. Just redirecting my discretionary spending and building a safety net. We'd always maintained separate accounts alongside our joint one for expenses, so this was completely within our established financial structure. 1 month into my redirection, I barely recognized myself in the mirror. The daily workouts had reshaped my body. Broader shoulders, flatter stomach, improved posture. The constant tension that had knotted my shoulders for months had eased. But the most significant change was in my eyes. They looked focused, alive in a way they hadn't been since her declaration. I updated my wardrobe with well-fitted clothes that suited my improving physique and projected confidence. When I wore a new shirt to dinner with friends, several people commented on how good I looked. Jessica noticed too, though she tried disguising her interest with criticism. "Isn't that shirt a little tight? Seems like you're trying way too hard." Very midlife crisis energy. I just smiled and left without responding, which seemed to annoy her even more. The redirection extended to my finances strategically. I continued contributing my share to joint obligations, but redirected discretionary spending away from things like the expensive women's retreat in Costa Rica Jessica had been hinting about for our anniversary. That money went instead into a high-yield investment account under my name only. I also invested in a photography workshop, rekindling a passion I'd abandoned years ago after Jessica complained about the time it took away from us. The irony wasn't lost on me considering her current stance. Photography got me outdoors on weekends, hiking to capture landscapes at dawn when the light was perfect. These solo excursions became another form of meditation. Behind the camera, framing each shot, I found flow states that allowed me to forget everything else. I invested in decent equipment, a good DSLR camera, and quality lenses. My first attempts were amateur, but I watched tutorials online and practiced constantly. Soon I was capturing images I genuinely felt proud of. Mountain landscapes bathed in early morning light, close-ups of frost patterns on fallen leaves, dramatic storm clouds gathering over fields. I started posting my work online, connecting with other photographers and building a small following that appreciated my eye for composition. Some photos even started selling as prints through an online marketplace, creating a growing side income that went straight into my separate account. "Where have you been going so early on Saturdays?" Jessica asked after several weeks, her voice carrying clear entitlement. She was used to me being available whenever she wanted. "Taking photographs," I answered simply. "Since when are you into photography?" The accusatory tone suggested I needed her permission for hobbies. "I've always been into it. I just haven't had time to pursue it until now." Her expression suggested she wanted to ask more, but couldn't figure out how, or perhaps didn't want to show interest in my life after deliberately stepping back from it. "Well, I needed help with house things last weekend, but you were nowhere to be found," she complained. "You could have texted," I replied calmly. "Phone works even in the mountains." "I shouldn't have to text my own husband to get basic help," she snapped. I just shrugged. Things change. Those 2 words hung in the air between us, and I saw something flicker across her face. The first hint that she was beginning to realize her declaration might have consequences she hadn't anticipated. At work, my renewed focus paid dividends. I approached projects with clarity and confidence that hadn't been there during months of marital distress. My boss Rob noticed the change immediately. "Whatever you're doing, keep it up," he said, after I successfully landed a major client that had been on the fence for months. "You're on fire lately." The professional recognition filled some of the void left by feeling unwanted at home. I volunteered for projects requiring travel, something I'd avoided previously to spend more time with Jessica. A 3-day conference in Chicago, week-long training in Denver, client meeting in Boston. Each trip was a breath of fresh air. Hotel rooms where I could spread out without judgment. Meals where no one made snide comments about my choices. Conversations with people who didn't view every interaction through ideological lenses. During my Denver trip, I met up with Tom, an old college friend who'd moved there years ago. We hiked in the mountains and I took some of my best photos yet. When I posted them online, my follower count jumped significantly and I sold 3 prints within a week. "You know, you could turn this into a serious side business," Tom said as we rested at a scenic overlook. "Your eye for composition is really good." His encouragement planted a seed. What if photography wasn't just escape? What if it could be something more substantial? A potential path to a different future? 3 months into my redirection, I was sleeping better, looking better, and performing better in nearly every aspect of my life except my marriage, which remained an empty shell of formal interactions and parallel existences. The irony wasn't lost on me. In withdrawing her affection, Jessica had inadvertently pushed me toward becoming a stronger version of myself. What Jessica didn't know was that I'd opened a separate checking account and started rooting 50% of my paychecks there, including performance bonuses. The other 50% was more than enough to cover my share of our joint expenses. I was building my escape fund dollar by dollar, not necessarily planning to leave yet, but wanting to see how this played out. One evening, as I prepared for a photography meetup, she asked an unexpected question. "Are you seeing someone else?" The entitlement in her voice was unbelievable. She could end our physical relationship unilaterally, but still expected exclusive access to my time and attention. I paused by the door, camera bag over my shoulder. "No. Why would you ask that?" "You've changed. You're hardly ever home anymore." The hypocrisy almost made me laugh. "I'm just redirecting my time and energy into things that fulfill me. Isn't that what you've been doing?" "That's different," she responded, clearly irritated that I'd used her own logic against her. "I made a personal choice about my body and autonomy, and I'm making personal choices about my time and interests," I countered. "Seems perfectly fair to me." "So you're punishing me?" she asked, voice rising slightly. "Not at all. I'm adapting to our new reality. You set a boundary, and I respect that. I'm simply setting boundaries of my own." She had no response, and I left without waiting for one. The pivotal moment came during a company retreat 6 months into my redirection. My team gathered at a lakeside resort for strategic planning and team building. After meetings, we relaxed around a fire pit under the stars. My colleague Emma, who joined our marketing department 3 months earlier, sat beside me. Emma was Jessica's opposite, warm, supportive, genuinely interested in other people's lives. "You know, when I first started, everyone told me how lucky I was to be working with you," she said quietly. "They said you'd completely transformed the department's performance, but also mentioned how much you've changed personally over the past few months. They said you used to seem withdrawn, almost sad. That doesn't match the person I've known." I stared into the flames, considering how to respond. Let's just say I went through some personal challenges and decided to focus on what I could control rather than what I couldn't. She nodded thoughtfully. "Well, whatever you did worked. You seem completely in your element now." As our conversation continued, I found myself relaxing in ways I hadn't with anyone in a long time. Emma was intelligent and insightful with sharp humor that repeatedly caught me off guard. We discovered shared interests in photography and hiking, and she seemed genuinely impressed when I showed her recent work on my phone. "These are amazing," she said, leaning closer to swipe through the gallery. "You have real talent. Have you considered showing these professionally?" "Actually, I just started selling prints online, and a local magazine might feature a few," I replied, surprised at how good it felt sharing this part of my life with someone who genuinely seemed to care. "That's fantastic. I'd love to see more of your work sometime," she said, smiling in a way that made me acutely aware of how long it had been since someone looked at me with genuine admiration instead of criticism. The warmth of her shoulder against mine sent an unexpected jolt through my system, a stark reminder of how long it had been since I'd experienced even casual physical contact. I carefully shifted away, uncomfortable with my reaction. Despite the situation with Jessica, I wasn't going to be the guy who starts something new before ending the old. When I returned home Sunday evening, Jessica was in the kitchen preparing dinner. something she hadn't done for us in months. The timing was suspicious. "How was the retreat?" she asked with unusual attentiveness. "Productive. We finalized the strategic plan for next quarter." She nodded, then said, "I saw some photos you posted. Beautiful location." "It was," I agreed, wondering at her sudden interest. "That woman in some of the pictures, is she on your team?" The question caught me off guard. I hadn't realized Emma had featured prominently in my uploads. "That's Emma, our new marketing specialist," I answered neutrally. "She's very pretty," Jessica observed, studying my face. The territorial behavior was rich, coming from someone who had explicitly rejected me. "I hadn't really noticed," I lied, feeling oddly defensive. "Really? You've taken about a dozen photos with her in them. Seems like you noticed plenty." I chose my next words carefully. "She happened to be in the frame during group activities. Why are you asking? You made it very clear that certain aspects of our relationship are over. You don't get to dictate who I spend time with professionally." She turned back to the stove, clearly annoyed that I wasn't apologizing or explaining myself further. "Just curious about your colleagues. I have a right to know who my husband spends time with." That was the moment I decided to accelerate my exit plan. The one-sided nature of her expectations had become unbearable. The following week brought surprises. Jessica started initiating conversations, asking about my day, suggesting we watch shows together. She made dinner several times without her usual ideological commentary. It was like living with a completely different person. Or, rather, the person I'd married before she transformed into a stranger. I knew exactly what was happening. She was trying to re-establish control, to pull me back into orbit now that she sensed I was drifting away. The realization strengthened my resolve. This wasn't about revenge. It was about self-preservation. Two key events aligned to create perfect opportunity for my freedom. First, I received a significant promotion at work with a substantial raise and more travel opportunities. I kept this information to myself, despite Jessica's increasingly desperate attempts to engage with me. Second, through my professional network, I learned that Jessica's company was planning major layoffs due to a merger. Her department was likely to be hit hard. This wasn't insider trading, just the kind of information that flows through business connections in our mid-sized city. Over the past months, through networking and new social connections, I'd learned about Jessica's company's plans. I'd even helped a colleague's spouse get hired at a competing firm 3 weeks earlier, knowing they'd need someone with Jessica's exact qualifications. I could have easily done the same for her. A single phone call would have secured an interview at minimum, but I chose not to. Instead, I accelerated my exit strategy. I consulted with a lawyer discreetly, paying cash from my separate account. I learned exactly what I needed to protect myself financially in divorce proceedings. I documented Jessica's declaration about ending physical intimacy, her subsequent behavior, everything that might help my case. I also discovered through casual conversations that Jessica had been bad-mouthing me to friends and family, painting herself as some kind of patriarchy victim while conveniently omitting her unilateral decision to fundamentally change our marriage. This sealed the deal. My escape needed to be complete and decisive. 2 weeks later, Jessica's company announced the layoffs. She came home visibly shaken. "My department might be cut next month," she said, clearly expecting sympathy. "I'm really worried." "That's tough," I responded with basic courtesy, but nothing more. "I'm sure you'll figure it out." The layoffs happened faster than expected. The following Friday, Jessica came home in tears. "I lost my job," she sobbed. "They eliminated our entire department." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, maintaining neutral expression. "What's your plan?" She looked shocked at my response. "My plan? I just lost my job. I need time to process this." "Of course. Take all the time you need, but our financial obligations don't stop. Just let me know how you plan to continue contributing to household expenses." Her jaw literally dropped. "Are you serious right now? I'm in crisis and you're asking about bills?" I shrugged. "Just being practical. We both contribute equally, right? That's always been your position." The next morning, I made my move. While Jessica showered, I transferred every penny from our joint account into my private account, leaving just enough to avoid overdraft fees. Then, I packed essentials and my most important possessions. When she emerged from the bathroom, I was waiting in the living room with divorce papers. "What's this?" she asked, eyeing the documents. "Divorce papers. I've realized I deserve better than a one-sided marriage with someone who unilaterally changed our relationship terms without discussion or compromise." Her face cycled through shock, anger, disbelief. "You can't be serious because I wouldn't sleep with you. That's what this is about?" "No, it's about respect and reciprocity. You made a choice affecting us both, presented it as non-negotiable, and expected me to simply accept it. That's not partnership." I paused deliberately. "By the way, I've moved our joint funds into a separate account you won't have access to until we reach settlement." Her face went pale. "You did what? You can't do that. I just lost my job. How am I supposed to pay for anything?" "Not my problem," I replied, echoing the same dismissive tone she'd used when ending our physical relationship. "You should have considered potential consequences before making unilateral decisions about our marriage." "This is financial abuse," she shouted, tears forming. "I need that money for basic necessities." "No, this is consequences. And speaking of necessities, the mortgage is due next week. I've calculated your half. It's listed in the documents. I'll expect your payment on time." She started panicking visibly. "Please, you can't do this. I have no income right now. I need time to find a new job." "You should have thought about that before declaring, 'not tonight' or any night, and treating me like an accessory rather than a partner. You wanted independence from patriarchal expectations. Congratulations, you've got it. Complete financial independence, too." Over the next week, Jessica's behavior changed dramatically. The feminist rhetoric disappeared, replaced by desperate pleas and renegotiation attempts. She suggested counseling, hinted at reconsidering her stance on intimacy, even tried seduction one night, which I firmly rejected. My lawyer advised not leaving the house yet, so we continued living together in increasingly tense circumstances. Jessica's friends started calling, telling me how cruel I was being, how I needed to support my wife in her time of need. I blocked their numbers one by one. Her parents reached out, suggesting we meet to discuss the situation. I declined politely, but firmly. "Your daughter made her choice months ago," I told her father over the phone. "I'm simply making mine now." 2 weeks into this standoff, Jessica's desperation peaked. She had no job prospects, no access to our joint savings, and bills piling up. She approached me one evening, completely defeated. "Please," she begged, tears streaming. "I need help. I can't do this alone." "That's an interesting perspective," I replied coolly. "Wasn't it you who told me women don't need men? That marriage is just a patriarchal construct? That physical intimacy with me was something you could unilaterally end without discussion?" "I was wrong," she whispered. "I got caught up in all these ideas without thinking about what they really meant. Please, I'll do anything. We can go to counseling, rebuild our relationship, whatever you want." "The problem is, Jessica, I don't want that anymore. You showed me who you really are, someone who views relationships as transactional, who takes what she wants and discards the rest. Now that you need something from me, suddenly you're willing to reconsider everything. That's not love or partnership. That's opportunism." I stood up, gathering my keys. "I'm moving out tomorrow. The divorce papers are ready for your signature. If you contest them, I'm prepared for a legal battle that will drain what little resources you have left. If you sign them as written, I'll provide a one-time payment to help you transition to your new independent life." "You planned this all along," she realized, her voice hollow. "From the moment I said those words, you were planning your exit." "No," I corrected her. "I planned this from the moment I realized you saw me as disposable. You taught me an important lesson about self-worth, Jessica. And for that, I suppose I should thank you." I moved out the next day into a new apartment I'd secretly secured weeks earlier. Jessica signed the divorce papers without contest, receiving her settlement payment as promised. I heard through mutual friends that she moved back with her parents in a different state, her feminist ideals apparently set aside in favor of practical needs. As for me, I continued building my new life, advancing in my career, developing my photography business, maintaining my fitness, and yes, eventually starting a genuine relationship with Emma, who showed me what real partnership looks like. 6 months after my divorce was finalized, my first photography exhibition opened at a local gallery. Among the images on display was a striking landscape taken at dawn during that company retreat. The morning I realized I deserved better. The greatest revenge wasn't taking Jessica's financial security or dignity. It was becoming the man I should have been all along, confident, self-sufficient, and unwilling to accept anything less than genuine reciprocal relationship. In trying to diminish me, she inadvertently set me free. Sometimes Jessica still tries contacting me, especially when struggling financially. I maintain minimal business-like communication for remaining legal matters, but otherwise I've moved on completely. This experience taught me that self-respect isn't selfish, it's essential. Sometimes the most powerful response to someone treating you as disposable is to simply agree with them and walk away, not in anger or bitterness, but with calm certainty that you deserve more than they're willing to give.